Welcome back, everybody, to Behind the Caution Tape. I'm your host, CrashLit. Before we get started, I'm going to go through a quick rundown of what we plan to cover today. So we'll talk briefly about the start of men's golf and women's tennis. From there, we'll dive into women's soccer, men's water polo, go to women's volleyball and their big non-conference matchup this week, and then we'll end with football and what it was like to be back at the Collie to start the season. So let's quickly get off to sports that are starting this week. We'll start off with men's golf, who actually start today. Team hosts the Southern Dunes Invitational in Maricopa, Arizona. USC is the host, even though it is in Arizona. And they'll play host to Eastern Michigan, Fresno State, Georgia State, Grand Canyon, Kansas State, Kennesaw State, and San Diego. That event will happen today and tomorrow. Trojans looking to start the golf season off strong. From there, we'll turn to women's tennis, who travel up to the Bay on Thursday through the end of the weekend on Sunday. Sunday, pardon me. So that'll be the September 12th through 15th. They'll be taking part in the Battle of the Bay Classic happening at the California Tennis Club in San Francisco, where they'll be facing the likes of Cal, Michigan State, TCU, Arizona, Stanford, Georgia, Pepperdine, Fresno State, San Diego, UC Santa Barbara, Virginia, Illinois, Kansas, Oklahoma State, Virginia Tech, Pacific, Arizona State, Boise State, Colorado, Texas Tech, and Washington State. So they'll also be looking to get their season started off on a strong note, and a lot of former Pac-12 members on that slate. So they'll be facing some familiar competition for sure. Now let's get to women's soccer, who wrapped up their non-conference schedule on Sunday. Trojans traveled up to the Bay for their final round of matchups. They beat San Francisco 2-0 on Thursday against San Francisco. An overall good win, and then they fell to Stanford in a 1-2 loss. But overall is definitely not a bad start for the Trojans. They're still unranked, but they are 4-1-1 to start the season, and they'll now get into their Big Ten play. So they'll have their first Big Ten matchup this Thursday. And funnily enough, they are playing a former Pac-12 member in Washington, who made the trip to the Big Ten with the Trojans. That game will be at 6:30 and taking place on the Big Ten Network. So definitely going to be very exciting. Definitely be easier for a lot of fans to tune in. And that'll be their first matchup, and then their first Big Ten member who was previously in the conference prior to this year will be Purdue, but that's not for a week. We'll get into that matchup in next week's episode. Now let's turn to men's water polo, who started off their season in the Creighton Invitational. They had 4 matchups, and for the most part, other than the matchup on last Sunday against UC Davis, the Trojans pretty much dominated their way through. Polls, as far as I can tell, have not been released yet for the second week of the season, but water polo got off to a strong start, let me tell you. They beat Long Beach State 14-6. That is a really solid win. Just absolute dominance the entire match, and Long Beach State didn't even get a goal in the second half. So that just shows how just the Trojans just turned it on, especially in that second half of the game. Then they whooped Cal State Fullerton 20-6. So that was just a solid first day on Saturday, where the Trojans quickly got out to 2-0. And then they faced on Sunday their probably toughest test in UC Davis, who came in the season ranked number 8. And UC Davis definitely tried to make a comeback at the end, but it was too little too late. Trojans held on to win 18-12. So still dominant. And I guess still pretty solid win. All of them were solid wins, but it seems like that UC Davis one was definitely the biggest fight, where the Aggies got double the goals that any other team on the slate got. And that leads us to Westcliff, the Trojans' final match of the weekend, where they won 21-6. So that just showed how dominant this team was. And overall, they just did not let anything through. So Westcliff just had no chance. So we'll see where the Trojans move up because of the competitive nature of their conference and them being in the MPSF with Stanford, Cal, and UCLA. It's going to be, they might not move up, but they're definitely not dropping. That's for sure. I don't see any way they can drop. We'll find out quickly. And now that brings us to women's volleyball, who traveled to the Creighton Classic last week for 2 matchups. They played at number 11 Creighton on Thursday. Then the following night, played Kansas State on the same court. Creighton match was definitely really hard fought match. Trojans played pretty well, but just was really tough. Creighton is good. They were number 11 heading into the game, and afterwards they've come out ranked 9th. USC, meanwhile, dropped 3 spots after previously being number 20. But overall, they're going to be, I still walked out really impressed. Other than the second set, the team played very well all 3 sets. The first set they won 25-23. Second set they lost 25-17. Third set was lost 25-23, and they almost forced a 5th set, but just few things just didn't quite go their way in the 4th, and the Blue Jays ended up winning 28-26. So it was definitely just a solid fight all around from the Trojans, but I think they're going to be really good. And like I said, this team's very balanced. You just have seen Mia Tuaniga spreading the ball out, getting everyone involved. And Adanya Famuina really leading the way in the Creighton match with 15 kills. And London Weijie Liam the night afterwards. Favor and Yan Wu also doing a great job. 9 kills against Creighton. But yeah, so, and also London Weijie, Ali Batenhorst. It's just showing that Tuaniga has options. And when you have options, as a setter, it's going to give you a lot more flexibility, and it's going to be a more balanced attack, which is why this team already looks more better, and they're not just going to have to rely on being hot like they did last year. Because last year's team, I thought, while they're still pretty good, they're pretty streaky at a lot of times, which can then make it tricky to win games a lot. And so because of that, now USC comes back to heads to Galen, is on their way home, and they'll be playing at Galen. They got 3 matchups this week. The first with the new number 1 in the Pittsburgh Panthers. This is going to be a big match for number 1 teams. I mean, for the first part, you are hosting the number 1 team in the country right now. So that's just right there is every reason why fans need to show up to support the Trojans. They're going to need your support, especially for how good Pitt is. And the other reason you need to show up is Pitt is the team that sent the Trojans home last year. Trojans lost in 4 sets to the Panthers in the NCAA tournament in the second round. And when I covered practice for Annenberg Media 2 weeks ago before the season started, before they went to Pepperdine. And the big conclusion I took away when head coach Brad Keller was asked about a match he was looking forward to, it's this Pitt match. And a big reason why, he said, is because the Panthers eliminated the Trojans last year. Like, when he was answering the question, you could tell he's aching for this one. He wants it so bad. Can't wait to see how the team responds to it, especially with most of the team having been here last year for it. And that was another big thing, is there's not as much turnover this year. So it's definitely going to be really interesting to see how all the returners, especially players like London Weijie, Tyra Ariel, Gala Trubin, who are all big parts of the team last year, are going to be. I'm guessing they're going to come out really fired up for that Pitt match. Then after the Pitt match, Trojans play host Utah State and Ohio as part of the SoCal Cup 1. Utah State comes to Galen on Thursday, first serve at 7 p.m. Ohio on Friday, first serve at 7 p.m. as well. So those are definitely going to be two very big matchups. I'm going to be at all three of these, and I'm definitely looking forward to trying to see how long I stay undefeated. I'll get towards that at the end when I talk about kind of my record and what I was at. So for now, let's turn to football, who had a really solid shutout win against Utah State. It was the first shutout since the 50-0 shutout to rival UCLA in 2011. So it was overall just a dominant performance by the Trojans. All aspects of the team looked really good, which is what you want to see. Danton Lynn, I think, is doing a great job reviving this defense. I think the defense has gotten better from last week to this week. Yes, I will acknowledge Utah State is not as good as LSU, but I don't think that changes the fact that Utah State, that's a game you just need to, show that you can get better. And I think the Trojans proved that, especially just how solid they looked, and they moved up 2 spots as a result. Poll result with the new AP poll coming out every Sunday. Trojans moved up from 13th to 11th. Last week, they did move up from 23rd to 13th. We just didn't have that information in time for last week's episode because of week 1 and no NFL. College football likes to take advantage all the way up to Labor Day to play games. So I had to wait till Tuesday to bring it out after we'd already aired our episode. So overall, USC now, and I think the other thing that I liked about seeing just the defense look solid, both with in the secondary and at the line of scrimmage, was it just was a solid, complete game. And then so is the same thing on offense. I think you saw that USC, definitely the run game looked better. Both Woody Marks and Quentin Joyner, I thought, did a great job running the ball. And then also Miller Moss continuing to look impressive, finding his receivers. And then it was so great that a lot of guys got to play. And one guy I was really excited to see play was Jaden Maeva. I have raved about this guy a lot ever since he got here, and I saw him in the spring game. And for those of you who listened to me when I'm on the Scoreboard podcast with Annenberg last year, you guys heard me say I walked out of the spring game more impressed with Maeva than Moss. And after that LSU game, however, I am sticking by Moss. However, Maeva's performance reminded me why I was super excited to see him play. And I think the best example of that was when he got a 7-yard rushing touchdown at the start of the fourth quarter. That shows his versatility. And I guess what I liked is he's kind of got the size, the build, and kind of that dual threat ability that we're used to seeing with Lincoln Riley's quarterbacks. You look at Caleb Williams, Baker Mayfield, Jalen Hurts, those guys that he's previously either coached to a Heisman or to New York for the Heisman ceremony, or they've been Heisman finalists. Those guys have usually been dual threat quarterbacks. So I think Maeva's definitely got a future here, but I think right now, Miller Moss and just kind of being that more traditional drop back quarterback is kind of what's working best for this team. So I'm all for sticking with Moss, but I'm definitely also am all for seeing Jade Maeva get his reps, especially in an opportunity like this. It's wise on 2 reasons. 1, Maeva gets his reps, and 2, you don't risk hurting Moss. So overall, I think great execution of this game plan by Lincoln Riley tonight. And now let's turn to the upcoming matchup this week. On Saturday, USC heads to Michigan. Or no, they have a bye week, and then they play Michigan. Pardon me on that. And USC, Michigan. And I think we won't get too into this now, but I think overall, I think it's going to be definitely a big matchup. It's obviously going to be a big matchup. It's USC's debut in the Big Ten Conference. So it's definitely going to be a big matchup for sure. And the Big House is one of the toughest places to play. Michigan Stadium is known for filling out. Their fans are passionate. You see it every week when they play. But Michigan did not look good against Texas. So I think Trojans have a real chance to go into this one and definitely make it so that way do be able to, I think the Trojans have a solid chance to win. Obviously, before I comment more, I'd like to see how Michigan does next week against Arkansas State. Wolverines do have to play before the Trojans do. So that's another advantage the Trojans have that we can get into later is they're going to be coming off a bye. Michigan, even though they're playing a cupcake in a game they will probably win, you still have to be thinking this is great for USC, especially before they start. It's going to be pretty tough Big Ten schedule, especially in the first couple of weeks. You got Michigan, Wisconsin, and then Penn State are three of your first four Big Ten conference games. So I think it's going to be definitely very big, but very exciting time for Trojan fans. I think with all sports too. I think we're going to see it with women's volleyball in a couple of weeks once they get going in the Big Ten. I mean, their first match is against Ohio State. Women's soccer, especially when they host Ohio State and UCL at the Coliseum. So we're going to see with a lot of sports. It's going to be just really exciting time for fans. And so now, yeah, and obviously last week I was at Utah. I was at the Coliseum. Great to be back for that game. Obviously, as I was saying, it's just electric. Great to be back. Obviously, fans are just really into it. I think you're just seeing that everyone's getting really into football because the team's winning. And it's just Lincoln Riley is, I think, kind of put his reputation back together. It took a hit last year, but I think he's realized he had to change some things. And I think you saw it with bringing Danton Lynn and that defensive staff with Matt Entz, Doug Belk, Eric Henderson, retaining Sean New, I think was a big one too. So I think it's just definitely going to be something that, and I think the Trojans team, yeah, is just better too. And obviously I think you saw it. They just came out fired up, and maybe just them playing Bryson Barnes, who was previously at Utah and that painful loss to Utes last year, had something to do with this, especially for the guys who were returning. But overall, I'm very impressed, very excited for actually what this Big Ten year's got to hold. And I think we're going to see this team do really well. And I think people are saying they're legit college football playoff contenders. I think this Michigan game is going to be a real indicator, especially big start to your football season. Obviously, that was the one and only game I made it to this week. Not a lot of home games actually this week. Funnily enough, that's about to change, and I'll get into that. But 1-0 on the week, so that puts me at 4-0 on the season. So 2-0 for women's volleyball, going back to those Pepperdine games. And I'm also now 2-0 on the season for football, going to Vegas for LSU, and then last week at Utah State. So now we'll get into what I'm going to be at this week. As I discussed, I will be at all three of the matchups for women's volleyball. Possibly could be a few minutes late. I will have class going right up to it, so I'll probably have to be getting in there hopefully right at first serve, but we'll see how that goes, obviously. But definitely get there if you can early. Get better seating for sure. It's going to be a great matchup. You got the number one team in the country, like I was saying, for that. Then obviously I'll be at both Utah State and Ohio on time for both of those. Then I'll also be definitely going to a couple of water polo matches this weekend, especially for the season openers. I forgot to get into that earlier, so I'd like to bring it back to water polo real quickly. Trojans host UC Irvine on Saturday at 12 p.m., followed by Whittier at 1:30. So they got a doubleheader to kick off their home opener, and then the following day they'll be on to Pepperdine. I'll for sure be on to both the matches on Saturday and possibly Sunday too. I just got to see kind of what my schedule looks like, what everything's going to be like. But overall, it's definitely, I think, going to be a really great week. So if this episode's a little short today, I'm really sorry. Just sometimes tough. Usually I try to focus more on the events I go to. So that's more because then I'm there. I watched it. I saw on TV. Obviously, kind of I want to give you sort of that fan perspective, which I feel like is best served when I'm there. And obviously, I do my best to make it to as much as I can. So when I'm there, I'll obviously give you more. So next week, obviously, it's going to be a bit busy with, volleyball and water polo being home. So I think those will be great opportunities for me to talk about that and really give you an idea of what it's just like to go to these games and why they're so much fun and why I am so into it. Because I think a lot of people are like, how do you make time for it? All that. The real reason I do it is I love it. And if you love something, you'll figure out a way to make time for it no matter what. So I think that's all we got for you today. Thank you again for tuning in to Behind the Caution Tape. Make sure to follow me on social media at CrashLit to see what I'm up to, what's going on with USC, and I'll obviously let you guys know when all this is up. Thanks again for everyone who supported me so far. It means a lot to just see kind of the response out of this. And I look forward to talking to you all next week. And as always, if you see me at a game, feel free to come say hi. We'll chat USC, chat whatever. Looking forward to meeting some of you all soon. Stay safe. I'll see you all this week at a sporting event, or if not, I'll see you back here next week. Fight on.